There's only one thing that I know for sure. We all have a story, and this is the story of Josefina Cruz Gutierrez. This is the story of my mother. And even though she passed away almost 8 years ago from complications from Alzheimer's disease, I breathe life into her story every single day by doing this. My mother was the youngest of 5 kids. My mom, for me, was a superhero. I believe it's true for many of us. My mom was invincible. She was everything to me. She was my light, the light of my life. And that's why I'm doing this. I really want to continue to honor her memory every single day. I did not choose to talk about this topic. It chose me. It chose us, the two of us, my husband, Wilson Molfolita. By the time my mom was 22, she had 3 girls. And my mom did everything that she could to give us the best life that she was able to get for us. She made a lot of sacrifices for the 3 of us at the time. She always wanted a boy. Well, she ended up having 2. In her late 30s, she decided to restart the family. So when I was 14, the oldest of my 2 brothers was born. And when I was 18, my youngest brother was born. In 1987, my youngest brother was still a baby. Wilson and I got married. 3 years later, we left Puerto Rico. So we moved from Puerto Rico to Akron, Ohio. And I remember going home and telling Wilson that I wanted to, that I had signed the papers to start graduate school in Akron, Ohio, and that we were actually moving in 9 months. So in August of 1990, we moved from Puerto Rico to Akron, Ohio. We couldn't even find it on the map. So I told my parents this is where we're going. After that, there was at least about 7 years that we really couldn't go to Puerto Rico as often as we wanted to go to see the family. So we had the benefit of seeing the changes in behavior that my mother experienced so much more clearly than my siblings who were with her all the time, because they were with her all the time. So for them, her behavior was normal, quote unquote, totally normal. They were not seeing any changes. So my mother, I am 56 years old right now, and by the time that my mom was 58, she was already having assessments because of her cognitive decline. And that's how it started. What did I notice? Well, going to Puerto Rico once or twice a year, my mom was forgetting, for instance, that she talked to me the day before. She was making frantic calls and saying, I haven't talked to you in such a long time. What's going on? Well, Mom, you talked to me yesterday. Or she was taking pots and pans, the dirty ones, and she was putting them under the cabinet. And if you're thinking, oh, but I forget where I've put things all the time, does that mean that I have dementia or Alzheimer's disease? Well, not necessarily. She was unable to retrace her steps. So she would put the pots and pans under the cabinet, and then she was forgetting to take them out and clean them, wash them, put them away. She was taking all kinds of pills. She was self-medicating. So many times when I talked to her, she sounded totally incoherent. So that's why my husband and I actually flew from the States to go to Puerto Rico specifically so that she could undergo her first neurological assessment at the age of 58. That assessment was deemed inconclusive. Yes, she was 58. Fast forward about 3 years later, it got worse. She could not find her purse, and she was accusing everyone around her that we were stealing things from her, her money, her purse, her medication. Actually, in her purse, she only had like 5 items. A pair of sunglasses, whenever she remembered to put them there. Her pills, a comb, and maybe some pictures. One morning in the year 2010, we were in Kansas City, living in Missouri at the time. It was about 6 a.m. in the morning, and my mom took her medication. Maybe 20 minutes later, she's wanted to take her medication again. And we tried to remind her that she had already taken her medication. And she was adamant that she had not taken her medication and she wanted to take it again. So that was another sign that we observed in her behavior. And then at that time, at the age of 61, we took her, actually it was my middle sister, who took her back to the doctor for a second neurological assessment. And at that time, she was actually diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. My mother is the only one in her family, to our knowledge, with that kind of medical condition. So after my mother passed away, I wanted answers. What I'm sharing with you today, and Wilbert, that's how I felt before I started my research. I just didn't really know enough about dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And I recall my youngest sister asking me, well, does she have Alzheimer's or does she have dementia? And it's a concept that is still very difficult for all of us to understand because we use the terms interchangeably, but they don't necessarily mean the same thing. Another type of dementia that is really popular right now or common is vascular dementia. And you may have heard about frontotemporal dementia because Bruce Willis has been on the news and Wendy Williams. So it affects the front and side of the brain, hence the name, and it affects language. Someone with that type of dementia may exhibit other types of behavior. For instance, the person may not show the empathy that you would expect someone to show in a given situation. The person may have a challenge retrieving words or understanding what he or she is reading. In the case of Alzheimer's disease, there are actually biomarkers in the brain where scientists and doctors, specialists can actually see how the brain has deteriorated and affected thinking, problem solving, of course, memory loss that we are so familiar with, speaking. So I can tell you a few stories about my mom. One is going to be a kind of a funny one. I remember it was Wednesday, July 18th, 2007. I think I'm still pretty good. I still remember some dates. And it was our 20th wedding anniversary. And my husband and I took my mother to that neurological assessment. Well, the Friday after that Wednesday, it was like my mom was my mom again. Like the woman that we grew up with, she was back. She even looked different. Light, energy, ability to communicate clearly. It only lasted one day. There is a movie, if you want to learn more about that. I believe the movie is June Again. And in that case, they depict situation where the person came back for about a week and then she relapsed into her Alzheimer's disease. My mom was following my dad after he left the house to go to work. And my dad is the kind of guy who would walk always, looking forward. He was not the type of person who was looking over his shoulder. So my mom was leaving the house after he left for work, did not know anything about her until a neighbor actually told him. So he had that opportunity to realize how bad things, were getting with her. The magnitude of that cognitive decline that she was experiencing. Because at first, none of us wanted to accept that our mother now was not the same person again. Now, how could she not recognize us and care for us like she did for such a long time? She was our world. And yet I remember when my dad said, can we move with you and Wilson to Colorado? Wilbur can tell you, we had demanding jobs in the federal government. And I did not hesitate, and we said yes. So that was 2013. And we, at the time, had a house in Puerto Rico, and my parents were living in that house. So we told them, okay, you can come live with us. We're gonna sell that house, and you can move with us to Colorado. So the night before we closed on the sale of that house, we went to bed late. We put everything away. We packed everything. We only had a week to take them with us to Colorado. So that morning we went, we closed on the sale of the house. When we returned, my dad was really quiet. My mother-in-law happened to be there. No one would utter a word. So I looked and I said, what's going on? Again, no one said a word. My mom had taken everything, every single piece of clothing, everything from every single piece of luggage, and had put everything away the way it was before. We invested all that time in preparing them to move with us to Colorado. She said, those are my things. Why are you taking them away? Why are you putting them away? So they moved to Colorado with us in 2013. Of course, they did not really, my dad particularly, did not enjoy the weather, the challenges with the language barriers. So 6 months later, they went back. In 2016, they returned to Colorado in January of 2016. By that time, my mom could not speak. So imagine, we're talking 2010, she was 61, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Everyone who is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease before the age of 65 is considered to have younger onset Alzheimer's disease. I published my book, Josefina, in 2022. And just to show you how quickly those figures are changing, for a few years, we were talking about 6.7 million people in the US with Alzheimer's disease. Now, I just received an email recently, that number is 7 million in the US. Of those, about 200,000 are living with younger onset Alzheimer's disease. And what is really sad about it is that the person may experience cognitive decline 10 to 20 years earlier. If you believe your loved one is showing signs of cognitive decline, memory loss, problems with problem solving, thinking, speaking, make sure that he or she receives the care and the attention that the person deserves and needs at the time. So again, dementia is an umbrella term. Dementia is a set of conditions that includes the behaviors that we describe or associate with memory loss. So dementia is the umbrella term. Under dementia, we have Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia. I can tell you there are hundreds of types of dementia, and there are hundreds of chronic conditions and illnesses that may contribute to the onset of dementia. Alzheimer's type. Let's use the numbers that we were using up until recently. 6.7 million individuals in the United States with Alzheimer's disease. That represents about 12% of the number of Alzheimer's cases worldwide. My mom had dementia. The type of dementia that she had was Alzheimer's disease. And those numbers, I mentioned earlier that after she passed away, I wanted answers. I really wanted to understand my risk level. I also wanted to understand, what is this? And then suddenly, like you're saying, it became like something that I was hearing and seeing everywhere. When I discovered that there are, drumroll, 12 modifiable risk factors for dementia. There are 12 modifiable risk factors for dementia. And I couldn't believe when I read and learned that there are so many lifestyle changes that we can make. I'm not making any guarantees. I cannot tell you that if then it doesn't work like that. We cannot change the aging process. We cannot change our ethnicity. We cannot change other factors, our gender, that may also impact our likelihood to develop dementia, Alzheimer's disease in particular. So when I read about these 12 modifiable factors, I wanted to learn more. So those modifiable factors are less education. Remember that I talked about low and middle income countries, hypertension, hearing impairment, smoking, obesity, depression, physical inactivity, diabetes, low social contact, excessive alcohol consumption, traumatic brain injury, and air pollution. I can tell you of two main categories that typically affect primarily Hispanics, Latinos, and Blacks: hypertension and diabetes. When I looked into this information and I considered the lifestyle that we had, my mother smoked. She suffered from depression. She was not necessarily diagnosed with diabetes. However, I can tell you that her diet was not considered a healthy one. She had some level of physical activity, but really I cannot tell you that she was a really active, like exercise type of woman. When I realized there's some things that I can do, and every single one of us can do, to potentially delay, ideally prevent the onset of Alzheimer's disease, I really wanted to share this information with other people. I'll give you one example. One of the facts that I learned is that about 6% of the Alzheimer's cases are related to genetics. So I wonder about what happened to the other 94%. So the other 94% are primarily related to any of these 12 modifiable factors. And that's why they are called modifiable risk factors for dementia. And I am not here to tell you specifically, if you eat this much of this, you won't get that. I know that we have some predisposition to certain chronic conditions. I remember years ago reading a book about type 2 diabetes because, well, I grew up thinking that eventually we will all get diabetes. And that's not necessarily true for type 2 diabetes. I am not a medical doctor. I love to do all this research and share what I have learned with other people. So the Alzheimer's Association recently reported on 10 healthy habits for our brain. So those habits are, in no specific order, see how well I do. Number 1 is exercise. Oh. Yay. So what I'll do is, you're welcome to share your story, but I love to exercise. And the two of us, we have 2 doggies, and the 4 of us take a walk every morning. The thing is to stay active. Recall that one of the 12 modifiable factors is physical inactivity. So we have to move. This is the perfect place to do so. Number 2, hit the books. Learn something new or continue to learn. That is learning something new. I love to sign up for different classes online just to challenge your brain. Quit smoking if you are a smoker. Research shows that for those individuals who quit smoking, they can lower their risk it could be comparable to those who have never really done so. Follow your heart. Again, engage in activities that pump blood flow, to the joints and the brain. One of the types of dementia is vascular dementia. Heads up, protect your head from traumatic brain injury. If you're riding a bike, wear a helmet, protect your head from injury. And here's one that I know we really like to talk about: fuel right. Eat healthy. I am not here to tell you what diet you should follow. There is one that doctors recommend, and it is called DASH, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, or the so-called Mediterranean diet. Dementia and Alzheimer's disease is not part of the normal aging process. It's not. We believe it is because of how common it has become. And the numbers are staggering, and they will continue to increase. For every person with Alzheimer's disease, there are, let's say, again, the number of 6.7 million people living with Alzheimer's disease in the United States, now up to 7 million. Twice as many serve as their caregivers. So in 2021, there was about 11 million people caring for their loved ones. My mom was one person, and it required Wilson, myself, my dad, my brother to be with us and care for her. That represents, in terms of unpaid hours, about 272 billion with a B dollars. Unpaid hours, of course. On average, people care for their loved ones about 5 hours, and I can tell you that that is a 24-hour-a-day job. Labor of love, nonetheless, but it's not 5 hours. All I can tell you is that I feel really good that my mom passed away in our house, that I was there for her. She had a series of mini strokes, and there was one day, actually, I had called my siblings and told them how bad things were getting. And I said, well, the doctor is saying 2 weeks, but only God knows how long she's going to live. I told them. They came. So we were talking, and suddenly we hear this noise. It's hard to describe. We heard something. It was like a cry from help, just like we see in the movies. And it was my dad, because my mom had stopped breathing. We ran downstairs to the basement, and my brother, who's a nurse, was able to, I'm going to say, bring her back. We kept calling her name, and we were all saying, not today, not today. Angels were there that night. And when I saw her breathing again, it was a miracle. So it's a challenge. We need a lot of support. The Alzheimer's Association, of course, has a system where they provide services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no cure for Alzheimer's disease. So we mentioned exercise, learning, quitting smoking, following the heart, meaning the cardiovascular exercise, protecting our head from injury. Exercising, yes. Eating healthy, sleeping well, taking care of our mental health. Certainly, dementia and Alzheimer's disease falls under the umbrella, the bigger umbrella of mental health. I remember in my prior life at work talking to people who used to tell me, but I'm stressed. One thing that I have always recommended, and I'm not a clinician, is identify the source of your stress. There's nothing you can do about it unless you're able to identify the source of your stress. I also recognize that we have people in our families who are unable to identify the source of their stress and do something about it. Buddy up. Social interaction is really important. Again, challenge your brain. Do something different. We have to get out of our
Right.
comfort zones.
Right.
Mentally, physically. So many things are given to us, with intelligent phones. I used to memorize phone numbers, not anymore. I'll share these numbers again, the key facts. These are from March 2023 from the World Health Organization. Currently more, this is what they said at the time. 55 million people have dementia worldwide, over 60% of whom live in low and middle income countries. Every year, there are nearly 10 million new cases. Dementia results from a variety of diseases and injuries that affect the brain. Alzheimer's disease is the most common, about 60 to 80% of cases. I can tell you that exercise alone can reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by about 40%.
Wow.
And that reducing the number of cases by about 5 years could reduce about 41% of the cases that we are identifying as new cases of Alzheimer's disease. The challenges that we face may result in the same outcome, which is poor health, chronic conditions that lead to conditions like Alzheimer's disease. There is a documentary called Limitless, and in that documentary, the person who is Thor in the movies, he underwent that genetic testing, and his likelihood of developing from a genetic perspective Alzheimer's disease is extremely high. I don't remember, all the numbers that were shared during the documentary. So he decided that he was going to change his lifestyle. So he was working with a nutritionist, decided to challenge his brain in ways, that I don't think I would challenge my brain necessarily. We're talking about Thor after all. But if you have time, I highly recommend taking the time to watch that documentary, Limitless. There's also an organization that helps people understand Alzheimer's disease by immersing themselves in that environment for a number of hours or days. And he did that in Limitless. What it would feel like to have Alzheimer's disease, inability to speak, to remember, to connect with other people is fascinating. And I'll tell you that I have been looking for information online because I would like to volunteer for that genetic testing. I want to know. I don't fear the results of that test anymore because I know that if 6% of the cases can be attributed to genetics, I will continue to do my part so that 94% hopefully will carry me through life without developing any type of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. That's really why we're sharing a little bit about our individual and collective experiences. Because I started by saying that there's only one thing that I know for sure, and it is that we all have a story. We all have a story. And nowadays, one of my frustrations is that we don't take the time to connect in a meaningful way with each other and hear our stories. We really have to connect with each other and hear each other's stories. It's critical. And we are in a world where influencers are not people with likes or hearts. Our elders are our influencers. And that's why, my mother was a simple woman with a big heart. And I've seen in magazines and other places, and I'm not taking anything away because I know that they also struggle with their challenges. My mother is not a celebrity. And I want to, and very proudly so, continue to share her story because she had a big heart. Everyone first, and she was always last. She loved like no other person that I have No. She instilled in me the values that are carrying me through right now. She instilled in me the mentality, the love for life that I have right now. These are stories of love, hope, and faith. And we really must continue to bring them back to what is really important and preserving those stories and that connection. I have faith. I believe in a world without Alzheimer's disease. I really do. I believe that every single one of you have already made some mental notes and commitments, some changes that perhaps we will implement right away, maybe a month or a year from now, so that we can live healthy and not develop any of those diseases. Well, I hope this has been of benefit to all of you. It's a complex topic. It involves so many other areas, and it's a multidisciplinary topic that I will continue to learn, and this is something that I will not stop. I will continue as long as God gives me the strength, mental, physical, emotional. Wilson and I will continue to do this because we believe that we need to share the stories of our loved ones who have lost or struggles with Alzheimer's disease. And furthermore, I know that one day in future generations, there will be the first Alzheimer's disease survivor. We cannot end this millennium without having a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Thank you. This is great. Thank you.